Hi, this is Mrs. Robertson, and today is Friday, November the 5th. I'm not here today, but we're going to go over everything that you are to do in my class. Now, you should already have your Bellwork completed, so let's go over the answers to make sure what you have selected is correct. So, the Bellwork was on page 370, the Power Up and Spiral Review. Problem number 24 in the Power Up. Here it says Veronica has 12 minutes of early, 12 minutes early to class. Deshawn was right on time and Candace was 3 minutes late. Which timeline represents the student's arrival to class? The correct one is this one. 12 minutes late, on time, and 3 minutes early. Now let's go to problem number 25. The table shows the scores at the end of a game of miniature golf. The integer 0 represents par. Sort the players from fewest shots taken to the most shots taken. So the fewest shots taken was Kristen. Different way to spell Kristen. Then Liam, followed by Bailey, and the most shots, Marisol. Now, let's look at our spiral review. In the spiral review, it says write each fraction as a decimal. All right, you should have this one memorized. 3/4 is the same thing as 75 hundredths. 1/5 equals 2/10, and that is 0 and 2/10. 3/20, this one, 20 is a factor of a 100. 20 times 5 is 100, so 3 times 5 is 15. 15 hundredths. Now another way you could have done this problem is 3 divided by 20. How many 20s are in a 3? 0. Add a 0. How many 20s are in a 31? Subtract. Add another 0. Bring it down and it goes into that 5 times. That's another way to get 15 hundredths. Now let's look at number 29. The table shows the height of Sonia's siblings. Who is taller? Well, in this one, 5/6 is more than 5 1/4. So Julio is the tallest. And we're to use this symbol, so Julio is greater than Frida. And you can do this one in your head because this is greater than a half and that's smaller than a half. So you know that Julio is greater than Frida's height. Kristen and Mitchell were given the same math assignment. Kristen completes 8/10 of her work in class. Mitchell completes 75 hundredths of his work during class. Who has more homework remaining after class? That would be Mitchell. He has 0.25 remaining, whereas Kristen has 0.2 because 2/10 plus 8/10 is 1 whole, and 25 hundredths plus 75 hundredths will equal 1 whole. Now, we're going to go to our next lesson. And the lesson we are doing today is Chapter 5, Lesson 4, located on page 379. So let's turn to page 379. Terminating and repeating decimals. Page 379. Chapter 5, Lesson 4, Terminating and Repeating Decimals. Our vocabulary startup. It says, any number that can be written as a fraction is called a rational number. Every rational number can be written as either a terminating decimal or a repeating decimal. What does that mean? Let's see. Draw lines from each word to its matching statement. The decimal form of a rational number where we have 0 and 3 repeating, the dot, 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 or the ellipse means it's going to repeat on and on. That matches repeating decimal. The decimal form of a rational number which has a repeating digit of 0, which means it stops. Here we have 0 and 625 thousandths. That's called a terminating decimal. It doesn't have anything that continues on. Now let's go on and look at the real world link. Remember, our essential question is, how are integers and absolute value used in real world situations? All right, so let's think of that as we go on to the real world link. Party favors. Jude is buying fruit snacks for party favors. He asks the cashier for a half a pound of fruit snacks for party favors. All right, for a half a pound of fruit snacks, it says, number 1, express 1/2 as a fraction. Well, 1/2 looks like that as a fraction. Write the decimal that represents a half a pound. 1/2 is the same thing as 5/10. Now it says, suppose Jude wanted to buy 1/3 of a pound. What decimal would the scale show? Well, 1/3 equals, we have 1 divided by 3. You should have this one memorized. We'll see what you come up with. It goes into 1 0 times, 3 times, subtract, add a 0, bring it down, and it's going to repeat. So 1/3 is 3/10 repeating. And as I said, I think a lot of you already have that one memorized. Let's turn to page 380. Here we have a Venn diagram that represents rational numbers. It says, rational numbers can be written as fractions. Here's how you would describe it using your algebraic terms. A over B, where A and B are integers and B does not equal 0. Here is our Venn diagram model. This whole thing represents rational numbers. Let's go into the center. These are the most specific numbers. Whole numbers are numbers larger than 0. Or actually, they include 0. 0's not in here, but it would include 0. Integers are all the whole numbers along with the negative numbers. Rational numbers are whole numbers, integers, and they include fractions and repeating decimals and numbers that have a pattern here. This is another one that would be, you would have a line over the 4. So those are rational numbers. Now let's go on and look at what we have here in this box. Fractions, terminating and repeating decimals, percents, and integers are all rational numbers. Every rational number, and are all rational numbers. Every rational number can be expressed as a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator. 3/10 equals 0.3. It's a terminating decimal. 4/5 equals 0.8, or 8/10. It's a terminating decimal. 5/6 is 0 and 8 with the 3 repeating. It does not terminate, but it repeats. Another way of writing it would be 0 and 8, 3 with the line only over the 3. Now let's look at bar notation, which follows what we were doing in this one. To indicate the number pattern that repeats indefinitely, Use bar notation. Bar notation is a bar placed over the digits that repeat. In this example, the 5 and the 4. 5, 4, 5, 4 repeat. So you would put bar notation over the 5 and the 4, indicating that the 5 and the 4 repeat. Excuse me. In this problem, you can see that the only digit that repeats is the 3. So you put bar notation over the 3. Let's look at example number 1. Write 5/12 as a decimal. Here you have 5, the top number is the dividend, the denominator is the divisor, 5 divided by 12. And they divided. And you can see that it ends up where the 6 is going to continue to repeat. We have the same pattern down below. So the bar notation for this would be 0 and 4, 1, 6 with the 6 repeating. Please write this down. It's good to practice writing these things. Write this down beside the answer so you know how to show bar notation. Now let's go to the next page, 381, and look at the practice problems we have here. Write each fraction as a decimal. Use bar notation if necessary. So we have to divide to change these to decimals. So 1 divided by 6. 6 is the divisor, 1 is the dividend. How many 6's will go into a 1? None. Add a decimal point and a 0. How many 6's are in a 10? 1. Subtract, add another 0, bring it down. 6 divides 40 6 times, and you can tell it's going to repeat. But just the 6 is going to repeat. So the answer is 0 and 16/100 with the 6 repeating. Now let's do the same thing in letter B. 8/9. 8 will go in the division box. 9 is the divisor that goes outside of it. How many 9's are in an 8? 0. Add a decimal point in the dividend and in the quotient, which is the answer to a division problem. How many 9's are in an 80? 8. 72, subtract, and you can tell this pattern is going to repeat. So the answer is 8/10 repeating with the bar over the 8. So we have 0 and 16/100 with the 6 repeating, 0 and 8/10 with the 8 repeating. Let's do letter C. 2 divided by 11. 11 will not divide 2. Add a decimal point in both spots, in the dividend and the quotient. Add a 0. How many 11's are in a 20? Just 1. Subtract. Add another 0. Bring it down. It will go into that 8 times. Subtract. Add a 0. Bring it down. It will go into that once, and you can tell we have a repeating situation. So in this one, you're going to have 0 and 18/100 with the 1 and the 8 repeating. Now, write a negative fraction as a decimal. When writing negative fractions as decimals, the process is the same. Divide as with positive fractions, write the negative sign in front of the decimal. So if you have -2/9, you divide 2 by 9, and then at the end, you're going to have a -0 and 2/10 repeating. All right, so just don't forget to include your negative sign at the end. Let's look at number 3. Write -2 and 2/3 as a decimal. That's going to equal -2 point. Then you have 2 divided. They did it. You can do it a couple ways. Here they changed it to an improper fraction. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8. So they have 8/3, and then 8 divided by 3 is 2.6 repeating. Another way is you can just do the 2/3. You know that 2 divided by 3, and this is one that you might have memorized. It's 0.6 repeating, and this put the negative 2.6 repeating. All right, now let's see how many of these you have memorized. I know you should have this one. That's negative 1/4. That'll be negative 25/100. You should have that one memorized. Negative 5/6. Well, 5 divided by 6, 0. 6 will go into that 8 times. Subtract. Whoops. 6 times 8 is 48. What did I do there? There. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract. Add another 0. Bring it down. 6 will go into that 3 times, 18, and it's going to continue to repeat. So that one is negative 0 and 83/100 with the 3 repeating. Make sure you can see your decimal point. And this one, I am just going to put negative 2 point, now 1 divided by 6. 6 will not divide 1. Add a 0, it goes into it once. Subtract, add a 0, bring it down 6 times, and now it's going to repeat with just the 6 repeating. So it's negative 2.16 with a line only over the 6. Okay, allow you to get caught up here. Make sure you show all of your division in these problems. I don't want you to just write down the answer. You need to show the division in both of these problems. Now, let's go on to page 382. Feel free to pause this at any time if you need to get caught up. Example number 4. Frankie made 34 out of 44 free throws this season. To the nearest thousandth, what is his free throw average? It says using a calculator, divide 34 by 44. So 34 divided by 44 equals, and this is what you have. So it's 77272727. So the answer to the nearest thousandths, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, that 7 will turn the 2 into a 3. Because remember, if the number behind your rounding spot is 5 or larger, you round it up. Otherwise, it stays the same. Let's go on to letter G. Of 9 students surveyed, 4 said they prefer exercising in the morning rather than in the evening. Express this fraction as a decimal. Use bar notation. So this fraction would be 4/9. So let's divide the problem. You're going to have 4 divided by 9. 9 will not go into 4. Add a decimal point and a 0. It will go into that 4 times. 36, subtract, and I have a 4 again. Add a 0, and it's going to repeat. So the answer is 0 and 4/10 with the bar over the 4. Now let's do the guided practice. Write each fraction as a decimal. Use bar notation if necessary. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to divide these problems, and yes, you have to show your work for the division. Let's start with number 1. This is you're going to put 7 in the box, 9 outside. 7's your dividend, 9's your divisor. It'll go into it 0 times. Put a decimal in the dividend and in the quotient. Add a 0. It will go into 77 times. subtract, bring down, and it's going to repeat. If you add a 0, bring it down. So 0 and 7/10 with the 7 repeating. In this problem, the first thing I'm going to do is put my negative sign so I don't forget it. Now, let's fix our division problem. 1 will go in the box, 33 outside of it. How many 33s are in a 1? 0. Add a decimal point and a 0. How many 33s are in a 10? 0. Add another 0. How many 33s are in 100? 3. That'll give you 99. Subtract. Add a 0. Bring it down. How many 33s are in a 10? 0. Add another 0. We can do it like this. Add another 0. Bring it down. How many 33s are in 100? 3. So you can tell this is a pattern that's going to repeat. 0, 3, 0, 3. So it's negative. Let me do the answer in a different color ink. 0 and 3/100ths repeating. That is your answer. Now let's do number 3. That's going to be a -2 point. Now, 5 divided by 6. 6 will not go into 5. Add your decimal points and a 0. 6 will go into 58 times. 48. Subtract. Add a 0. Bring it down. It will go into 23 times. 18. Subtract, and you can tell that the 2 is going to repeat, meaning it's going to be a 3 repeating. -2 and 83/100ths with the 3 repeating. Now let's do this problem here. 10/15. Well, you will have 10 divided by 15. 0 times, add a decimal point and a 0. 15 will go into 106 times. That's 90. Subtract, add a 0, and you can tell that this is going to repeat. So the answer is 0 and 6/10 with the line over the 6. You should have this one memorized. 4/5 is the same thing as 8/10, so it'll be -0.8. That is the answer for that problem. It's always nice to circle your answers so you can see where they are and include your negative signs. If you didn't know that, you could do 4 divided by 5. Add a decimal point. It goes into it 0 times, and it goes into that one, and it terminates. When it stops, that's called terminating. In this problem, 1 point, we have to do 5 divided by 9. 0 times, add your decimal point, or excuse me, 9 goes into 55 times. That should be a 5. 45. Subtract, and it's going to repeat. 1 and 5/10 repeating. Circle your answer. Now let's go to problem number 7. In problem number 7, it says Dana bought 2/3 a yard of fabric to make a new purse. Write the amount of fabric she used as a decimal. That will be 2 divided by 3. It goes into it 0 times. Add a 0. 3 will divide 26 times. 18. Subtract, and it's going to repeat itself. So the answer is going to be 0 and 6/10 of a yard, with the 6/10 repeating. Now, what are we going to do for our homework? Your homework assignment is going to be this. On page 383, I want you to do all. And you must show all work. I want to see all of your division. You must show your division work on this page or on a separate sheet of paper. Be very careful on these problems. All right. Then on page 384, number 17. So on page 384, only do number 17. And if you are well behaved, that is it. If there are any problems in class where you are not being respectful to the teacher or causing problems, then you will be assigned the problems on page 385. But as of right now, your homework assignment, page 383, all 1 to 16, and it's a total of 17 problems. Have a good day and be good.